Welcome back to Outward Home Learning. The subject's computer science, and today we're looking at different factors that affect network performance. So for this, as ever, we're going to go straight over to Mr. Holton, who's going to tell us all about things that affect network performance, and then you've got some questions to complete and a task. Over to Mr. Holton.
You probably have a network at home, and maybe you'll find that it works better at different times of the day. And that is because there's a few things that affect the performance of that network. And we're going to cover what they are, and we're going to do it really by an example. And we're going to have that picture, that sort of idea of you sat at home and you and your family using it, and you're all gathered around your Wi-Fi router, maybe with your smart TVs, smartphones or whatever, trying to watch things like Netflix and Amazon Prime separately, because we don't watch the same program together anymore, do we? So let's have a think about this. What can affect the performance here? Well, the first thing, and one of the most important things, is if you're dealing with a wired or a wireless connection. And there's a separate video all about that. If you have a look at the video about Ethernet and about Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, then we'll talk about this in a bit more detail. But let's just cover the basics here. Your Wi-Fi router is actually, it's a clever thing, but it's actually a wireless access point, a router, and a switch all built into one. And now have a look at the network hardware video to find out more about those sort of things. But you can connect to it one of two ways. You've got maybe the idea that maybe somebody's watching something on a tablet, and so they're connecting wirelessly, all right? And then so that will send a radio signal between the tablet and the Wi-Fi router. But then maybe you have a cable coming out of your router as well, and that's going to a PC somewhere, and that's plugged right into the back of the PC. Now, which one will be better? Well, it will be the wired connection. Wired connections are always much faster than wireless, and there's a few different reasons for that. One of the main things is that it's subject to less interference. So you don't have things like walls in the way, you don't have worries about in windows and reflective surfaces and stuff like microwaves getting in the way, because yes, microwaves can cause havoc with a Wi-Fi router. You don't have all that to worry about. You can also put more ones and zeros over this connection at any given second than you can through the air. It's just a bigger sort of pipe for data to go through. So that means they give you more bandwidth. So a wired connection immediately has an advantage over a wireless connection. So that's the first thing that can affect wireless performance. The second thing that's worth considering is how many people are using the network at once and what they are doing on it. So imagine now we are increasing the number of users that you've got. You've got somebody, looking at social media on their smartphone. You've got maybe your parents tuning in to something on their smart TV, which is using a wireless signal as well. And this Wi-Fi router now has to split itself like 4 or 5 different ways. So the number of people that you have on the network is really important, simply because now the bandwidth that's available to the router, so the number of ones and zeros it can go through in a second, has to be shared now between all those different users. And like I said, what they are doing is really important as well. Another way of saying that is what application they are using on the network. Take something like gaming, for example. Gaming actually doesn't use a lot of data, not compared to doing something like looking at a high definition video on Netflix. So what you are doing on the network is really important. There's nothing really other than maybe downloading a massive file that eats up bandwidth in the network. Okay, what else? So we've got wired and wireless connections, the number of people on the network, what people are doing on the network. The final one that's worth mentioning is just the distance that the data has to travel. Now, this does make a difference, but it all sort of comes down to wired and wireless again. So going back to our example, this person here, if they are actually physically further away to the Wi-Fi router compared to this person, then it's more likely that they're going to have more interference, which is going to reduce the bandwidth. So there might be like another wall in the way, which will cause some issues, and that will slow down this person's connection to the network. So yes, definitely for wireless, the distance that you have to your Wi-Fi router is a problem. But this is also a problem for wired connections. It is important to say that you do have interference on a wire, on like a copper wire in particular, which you'll probably have in your house for your network cable. And the longer that cable goes on for, the more interference that will creep into the signal being sent down the wire. But this is admittedly much less of a problem, unless you are really talking about a really long wire here, in which case your signal will degrade past the point where it can actually be received. So that is something to consider as well. But they're your main things. You've got the fact that you've got a wired or wireless network is one of the major things that affects what network performance, the number of people and what they're doing on it, and also the distance you are to your wireless access point or to your switch and your hub. If you have all those things sorted, then you can have a happy network and browse as much high definition video as you would like.
Thanks, Mr. Holton. So now we found out a little bit about what affects a network performance. What we're going to do is complete the fill in the blanks activity. So your first task is the fill in the blanks activity, and you've got about 10 minutes to do that. You can always check back to Mr. Holton's video if you need to by rewinding a little bit. So 10 minutes starting now. Hopefully you had enough time to complete that. If not, you can pause the video, but otherwise we're going over to Mr. Barnes to review the answers.
Right, okay, let's have a go at this fill in the blanks activity about factors affecting network performance. So it says there's several factors that can affect the performance of both wired and wireless networks and slow down the speed of data transfer. And then we've got a fill in the blanks. So we've got large numbers of blanks on the network can reduce bandwidth available. So that's going to be large number of users can reduce the bandwidth available, because the bandwidth that you've got doesn't change, and therefore it has to be split between the number of users. So more users, less bandwidth. Bandwidth is the amount of data that can be sent via a connection over a given time. So then we've got large amounts of blank being transferred, or large amounts of data being transferred, okay, is going to slow down your network. Imagine if you've got a sibling that is downloading the latest 4K movie. Well, that's a massive file, and that's going to take a lot of your bandwidth and therefore reduce the speed of your network. Large numbers of blank being used. Well, if there's large numbers of applications and all those applications are using some of your bandwidth, that is going to slow down the network. Then we've got the blank, so the distance the data has to travel, so the strength of the signal reduces on wired networks the further it has to travel, but also over time with wired as well. Next we've got the speed of the blank. Well, that's going to be the speed of the server. Okay, so if you're on a client server network, how much demand the server is under is going to depend on how quickly it responds to you, and therefore affect your ability to do things on the network. We've then got using a blank instead of a switch, so that's going to be hub. Okay, and using a hub instead of a switch can affect network performance, because a hub will send all the data to everyone, whereas a switch will just send it to the designated IP address, and that obviously means there's more traffic on the network as everything goes to everyone, and that will slow it down. And then that means we've got the performance of wireless networks is also affected by interference. Okay, so particularly on wireless networks, things like walls and such can affect your signal strength. Microwaves and different types of radio frequencies can affect the strength of your wireless signal. And there are your answers to the factors affecting network performance fill in the blanks activity.
So as ever, it's now time for your exam question or exam style question. There are a couple of exam questions for you to complete on this topic. Give them your very best shot. You've got 10 minutes. We'll review them after. We're now going to go over to Mr. Barnes to review those answers. Make sure that you make any amendments you need to make so that you've got those for revision. So over to Mr. Barnes.
Right then, let's have a look at these exam questions as part of our deliberate practice. These ones are all based around factors affecting network performance. So question 1, we've got an office introduces a WAP, which is a wireless access point, to allow network access to wireless devices. The office manager has noticed that performance of the network has recently decreased. Describe how introducing wireless access could have slowed down the network. Okay, so I'm going to start with the most obvious answer in my opinion, which is wireless speeds are slower than cabled speeds. Okay, so it's 2 marks here, so we just need sort of two points. So I'm going to say wireless speeds are slower than cable speeds. There could also be interference on the wireless signal from things like walls or other devices. Okay, so I've mentioned sort of 2 things there. I'm going to go on and answer the next question as well. So identify 2 other factors that could affect the performance of the network. So I'm going to say the first one, and bear in mind it's identify here, 2 marks. There's a lot of lines, but it's 2 short, sharp answers. So I'm going to say the number of users, using the network at the same time, and that's important that you put at the same time, because you could have 1,000 users on a network, but if they're all using it at different times, it's not really going to impact as badly. If they're all using it at the same time, it will. Okay, and I'm also going to say that the distance or signal strength due to how far the data must travel. Okay, so I reckon I've made 2 points there as well. So let's have a look. Let's get the mark scheme at the ready. Okay, so hopefully we can see that. Okay, so it says here 1 mark per bullet to max 2 marks. So the first bullet point says wireless transmission is slower than cabled, so I've put wireless speeds are slower than cabled, so that's going to get me 1 mark. I've then said there could also be interference on the wireless signal from things like walls or other devices. So wireless can be limited by interference for a 2nd mark, and I've even sort of met a 3rd point, although it's only 2 marks, so I can't get it, which is such as walls can disrupt the signal. But either way, I've got 2 marks. You could have also said things like more devices or users could be connected, which gives an increase in traffic, and that then reduces the amount of bandwidth each user has. So if you had a 10 megabit, let's say to keep it simple, 10 megabit connection, and you had 10 users, they all get roughly 1 megabit each. However, if you had 100 users, they've now got 0.1 megabits each. Okay, so that's that one. The second question then is identify 2 other factors. So you want to try to not name anything you've mentioned at the start. So we've got here, let's just move it around this way, probably a bit easier, just bear with me. So we've got here the number of users using the network at the same time. So that 2nd bullet point there says that number of users using the network at the same time. And then I've got the distance or signal strength due to how far the data must travel. So we've got distance data has to travel / signal strength. So that gets me my 2 marks. What else could we have had then? We could have said the amount of bandwidth available. We could have said the amount of data collisions or like packet loss. We could have said interference, the amount that's actually being sent It could be dependent on the applications being used. It could be dependent on the server performance. It could have been because you're using a hub instead of a switch. And remember, a hub has increased traffic because it sends it to everyone, whereas a switch just sends it to the correct device because it stores the IP address. So you've got a whole host of different answers there that could have been for that question. And there are your answers to the factors affecting network performance questions.
And that's what you need to know about factors affecting network performance. Well done for taking part in today's lesson, and we will see you next time.